In today's video, we're dipping our toes back into the world of artificial intelligence as I've asked ChatGPT who it thinks are the top 25 WWE superstars of all time. And I made it very clear that I just want WWE specific answers here. I actually told ChatGPT to only include accomplishments that were achieved within the WWE to come up with this list. And I figured if I were to make this list, people would just get angry with me and the pitchforks would come out. But if our future ruling overlord emperor ChatGPT were to do it, then we just have to take it as fact. And as always, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, ring that bell for notifications. If you're a wrestling fan, I am confident you're gonna fall in love with his YouTube channel because we always upload daily wrestling content. All right, folks, let's just jump into it. Starting off the list, ChatGPT says that the 25th best WWE superstar of all time is none other than CM Punk. Now, for my personal favorite list, CM Punk is significantly much higher, but I actually think that when you encapsulate everyone in the history of the WWE, that perhaps Punk is in the late teens and in the 20s, so I don't think that this is like entirely far off. Here is ChatGPT's reasoning. It said that CM Punk is a multi-time WWE champion, leader of the pipe bomb era, whatever that is, and made a significant impact during his WWE tenure, including a 434-day reign as WWE champion. Honestly, that's a pretty good resume to have. On top of that, I just think that CM Punk, aside from his accolades and aside from his in-ring skills, I think is one of the top three, arguably the best ever on the microphone to ever grace the WWE. So I think when you're making these lists, CM Punk, even though he spent that huge chunk of time outside of the WWE and not really wrestling at all, I think is warranted to be in the conversation. At 24, ChatGPT has Andre the Giant. Well, when it comes to icons and legends of the industry, it doesn't get more iconic and more legendary than the first ever WWE Hall of Famer in Andre the Giant. Obviously, he was there significantly before my time, but even now, to this day, he is still immortalized. He is still revered and talked about as one of the greatest attractions ever in the history of this sport. I bet being around back then, maybe going to a live wrestling show, or even just seeing him on TV would have been bewildering to see a man that enormous grace a WWF ring. I obviously can't comment too much about it because, as I mentioned, it's just so before my time, but even then, I recognize the legacy that Andre the Giant has left behind. At number 23, ChatGPT has Kane. And I do feel like had CM Punk not left the WWE for as long as he did, that there's no way that Kane would be ahead of CM Punk. Frankly, I don't think I'd have Kane ahead of CM Punk even then. ChatGPT says that Kane is a multi-time world champion, longtime cornerstone of the WWE roster, known for his longevity and his versatility, all which are absolutely correct. This man joined the WWE in the Attitude Era as the Big Red Machine, was in it before with some goofy characters like Isaac Yankem, and he was part of the WWE system right into the 2010s. I just never really clicked with Kane. It was never a character that really worked for me specifically, and there are very few and far between like super like legendary, iconic, goddamn must-watch Kane matches. I think that Kane is known for his moments, his individual flashes of brilliance and the flashes of his character work, but when it comes to like his matches, there's very few that I'm like dying to rewatch. Is he legendary? Is he iconic? Of course, I would never take that away from him. It's just not somebody that has really worked for my particular taste palette in wrestlers. At 22, we have a modern WWE superstar. We have Seth freaking Rollins. And I think that you can make the argument that Seth Rollins should be higher on this list. This man has done it all and has really carried the WWE in terms of quality matches and fantastic storylines and major moments since 2015. ChatGPT says that Seth Rollins is a multi-time WWE champion, major figure of the WWE's current era, and consistently one of the best in-ring performers, all which is correct and everything pretty much I just said. I think perhaps once the dust is settled and Seth Rollins Rollins' career that he is going to be significantly much higher on this list, and to some people he could crack the top 10. And number 21, for those Latino Heat fans, we have Eddie Guerrero. According to ChatGPT, it has Eddie Guerrero on here because he's a former WWE champion, beloved by the fans, and one of the most charismatic and talented performers in WWE history. Stop me and tell me when ChatGPT is telling lies, because all of that, everything that ChatGPT just said is such a actually really accurate and great encapsulation of what makes Eddie Guerrero so good. Not only is he such a great in-ring technician, high flyer, and a mixture of American and Mexican style wrestling, but he's also just like one of the most charismatic, most likable characters and most believable baby faces or heels that you can think of. He could be a guy that you want to invite to your quinceañera, all the way to the guy that you don't ever want to run into in the middle of the night. That to me speaks volumes to not just how good Eddie was as an in-ring performer, which everybody knows he was excellent and amongst the best to ever breathe air on this planet, but his character work I still believe is highly underrated.
Timing. Oh my God.
Dude, the crowd is losing it. Oh!
And then he power bombs him right on top of Drew.
Oh!
Kick from Cole. Oh, what he did against Ospreay.
Rad, right?
Yeah.
Look at this angle, too.
That was a sneak peek of this week's Wrestling is Cool Match Club watch-alongs, available exclusively on patreon.com/SantiZap. This week we're getting the Rhodes Brothers versus The Shield for the tag titles. A last man standing match between Ilya Dragunov and Dijak. The triple threat classic between Sheamus, Drew McIntyre, and Gunther at WrestleMania 39. A forgotten gem between Drew McIntyre and Adam Cole down in NXT. And the legendary last man standing match between Umaga and John Cena. You're gonna get these and more, like the Raw reviews, SmackDown reviews, the Wrestling is Cool podcast 3 days earlier than everyone else, and our Royal Rumble watch-alongs that we're doing. We're going through every Rumble in history at the moment. Again, all of this is available on patreon.com/SantiZap. I'm confident that you're going to fall in love with it if you even just give it 1 month. Again, the link will be in the description or the link in the pinned comment. Now, back to the video. This one is interesting. At 20, ChatGPT has AJ Styles, and I think it's interesting because I told ChatGPT specifically to not include accolades that were achieved outside of the WWE when making this list. And a lot of AJ Styles accolades and a huge chunk of his resume, the majority of it comes with time outside of the WWE through Ring of Honor, New Japan, and of course, famously TNA. Now, here's ChatGPT's reasoning. Says that AJ Styles is a multi-time WWE champion. He had a major impact since debuting in 2016 and consistently puts on high quality matches. I definitely don't disagree here, but I have a hard time putting AJ Styles above the likes of CM Punk, Seth Rollins, and Eddie Guerrero in a WWE-centric list. It's actually pretty impressive that AJ Styles has now been in the WWE for 8 years, and in those 8 years, he was incredibly impactful, but again, a huge portion of the reasons why people consider AJ Styles to be potentially in the GOAT conversation is because of his entire body of work, and a good chunk of it is outside of the WWE. So I think this might be a little bit high. At number 19, we have Rey Mysterio, the deadbeat dad. ChatGPT says he's the iconic high flyer, multi-time world champion, and revolutionized WWE's cruiserweight division. Definitely do not disagree with any of those things. Maybe a little bit higher on this list than I would personally have him, but it is true. Rey Mysterio is an incredibly influential character in the history of professional wrestling and what happens actually within the ropes. And his longevity also has to be something that needs to be studied, just like Kane's was, because this man is still going at full speed here and when he's in his 50s now. But to have him higher than some of the guys that are on this list, I don't think is correct. I think that I would put personally Rey Mysterio, below, at the very least, Seth Rollins. I will say, when I was a kid, Rey Mysterio was one of my favorites of all time. I actually wish that he won more world championships, and I wish he actually got a proper run with a WWE championship. Thanks for that, Cena, for only giving us a 1-hour reign of Rey Mysterio as WWE champion. But Rey Mysterio truly is fantastic, maybe just a tad bit high on this list for me. At 18, this is fascinating. ChatGPT is such a mark. It has Daniel Bryan, who says is a multi-time WWE world champion, key figure in the rise of WWE smaller individuals and more technical wrestlers, and a fan favorite underdog. underdog. Again, we look at Daniel Bryan's entire body of work in the history, like in all that he's accomplished across the world of professional wrestling, then actually he might warrant even higher. You know, his work in Ring of Honor and his current work in AEW might push him higher if we were just doing wrestlers in general. But in the WWE, I think that this might be a little bit too high. Now, if we were doing just a list of most technically proficient wrestlers, I would probably put Daniel Bryan at the damn near the top, if not the tippity top of this list. But when we think of greatest WWE superstars, we think of more than just that. But ChatGPT is right. I do think that Daniel Bryan was one of those spearheads for showing the likes of Vince McMahon that you don't need to be a 6'5" muscled freak in order to be a world champion caliber character. So he broke molds. He definitely helped trailblaze. But when it comes to a WWE centric list, I think that he shouldn't be higher than Seth Rollins. At 17, ChatGPT has the Ultimate Warrior, saying a WWE champion, major figure in the late 80s and early 90s, known for his intensity and larger than life persona. Yeah, when you think of the Ultimate Warrior, that's immediately what you have to go to, like just how over he was as a character, to the point that he was rivaling Hulkamania, which is something that seemed impossible at the time with how ridiculously popular Hulk Hogan and Hulkamania was. Of course, we know that with the history of things that this is an individual that got in his own way a lot of egos got in the way that prevented from work to properly be done in that era. It's interesting just hearing how politically charged the WWF locker room was back in the late 80s and 90s. Yeah, in terms of cultural impact, the Ultimate Warrior has to be seriously considered as one of the more influential figures to come out of that era of professional wrestling. For me personally, maybe because I wasn't around at that time, I think that this is entirely too high on this list. But I know that there's somebody that watched wrestling in the early 90s and late 80s that is just screaming through the screen trying to strangle me. Whatever, it is what it is. Listen, this video isn't even about my list. It's not even about my list. It's ChatGPT's, okay? So go give your artificial intelligence overlord a high five that it also picked the Ultimate Warrior to be on this list. But it wouldn't be on mine, all right? That's all I'm saying. He wouldn't be on mine. I love number 16. At number 16, ChatGPT picked Mick Foley, saying WWE champion, played multiple iconic characters like Mankind, Cactus Jack, Dude Love, and had brutal, memorable matches. I think it's fair to say that even to this day, even though he has legend and icon status, that Mick Foley might be the most unheralded, most unappreciated WWE superstar of all time, with everything that he put himself through, with how many top tier talent he helped get over, like Triple H, like Randy Orton, like Edge. These are guys that after their bout with Mick Foley became the megastars that we knew them for. It's like a ritual by fire to go through a street fight or some sort of really violent car crash with Mick Foley. And even then, I still don't feel like he gets the love and respect that he ought to, really. Mick Foley is one of my favorites, arguably would be higher on my list compared to this one, but at least ChatGPT is giving some love to Mick. And number 15, ChatGPT has the Ayatollah of rock and roll, Y2J Chris Jericho. It is kind of insane what Chris Jericho has been able to accomplish just all over major wrestling organizations, whether it's New Japan, AEW, WWE, WCW. This guy has been everywhere and has done anything and everything possible in the world of professional wrestling and is still around today with a brand new gimmick. Hi guys, I'm the learning tree. Something that makes me want to punch the screen, but I know that's what he's going for. So even then, he's still succeeding in his character work today. Chris Jericho might be the best gimmick chameleon ever in the history of professional wrestling, being able to go from one iconic character, reinvent himself, turn and become into another iconic, super over character, and do it over and over and over again. It's the reason why Chris Jericho has been able to be around in the world of professional wrestling as long as he has, because he is the master of reinventing and changing things up for the times. I think 15 is actually like a pretty good spot. He might actually show up on my list at around 15 as well if I were to make one. And number number 14, ChatGPT has the rated R okay, sorry about that. Superstar Edge. ChatGPT recognizes Edge as an 11-time world champion, major figure in WWE's tag team and singles division, and had an iconic comeback story. I'm glad that ChatGPT brought up his return in 2020 because it is something to behold. Kind of similar to CM Punk, but obviously under different circumstances. There's just such a huge chunk of time where Edge could have continued to build his legacy for himself while he was out because of his retirement and his neck injury, that it's very possible that had he been around for the 2010s, that one, wrestling would have just been better, but two, he would be significantly higher, not just in ChatGPT's list, but in the list of pretty much every wrestling fan. Like, if you think about it, before his retirement, we only had Edge, like 6 years in the main event scene when he joined the main event scene in early 2006, I would say. And then by 2011, we lost Edge. He should have been in the main event scene for over a decade, 15 years, closing into 20 years. But unfortunately, that just wasn't the case. But I'm happy that Edge and now Adam Copeland over in AEW was able to come back. I'm glad that he's shaken off the ring rust, that he's back in the ring, having great matches, telling great storylines. Edge truly is an all-time great. And number 13, I guess ChatGPT doesn't care that people get canceled. It has Brock Lesnar on this list. And I think, like, when you look at the resume of Brock Lesnar, the things that he's accomplished on paper, it would be ludicrous to keep him off a list like this. But when you really peel back the layers and look at how he achieved these accomplishments, I feel like there's more of an asterisk to his name. And I'm not talking about allegations. I just talk about the fact that many of his championships, many of his accomplishments came when he was a part-time performer, only appearing 3 to 4 times a year. And personally, I feel like somebody that wins the same or maybe even less accolades than Brock Lesnar, but was there 365 days of the year, would be higher on this list for me, which is why I'm looking at somebody like Seth Rollins that I would have over Brock Lesnar personally. Here's ChatGPT's reasoning. It says that Brock Lesnar is a multi-time world champion, Royal Rumble winner, WrestleMania main eventer, dominated WWE across 2 separate runs, and is one of WWE's biggest attractions. That last part is incredibly true. It's part of the reason why he was able to be a part-time performer. But I like what ChatGPT mentioned here, the fact that he was dominant in 2 separate runs in 2 entirely different eras of professional wrestling. In the Ruthless Aggression era, where he was at the top, eating everyone alive for about 3 years before he decided to leave, and then in 2011 when he decided to come back to the company. 2012, sorry, getting my timelines wrong. 2012. You get what I'm saying? Like, it's impressive to see Lesnar do what he did across 2 entirely different companies, really. Like, WWE in the early 2000s versus the 2010s is an entirely different beast altogether. At number 12, ChatGPT, we're gonna have to throw hands because how is this man not higher on your list? Although I can make an argument as to why he's not that high on your list. It's Kurt freaking Angle, ChatGPT. On my list, he would be higher, but we did talk about the fact that I told ChatGPT specifically to consider only accolades and achievements in the WWE when making this list, and a huge portion, more than half of Kurt's career, was spent in TNA. It was an amazing career in TNA, but it's not taken account in this list, which is probably why he's not in the top 10. But for me personally, if I'm just making the list, regardless of whether or not I'm including TNA stuff, I have Kurt Angle in my top 5. I think Kurt Angle is one of the GOATs, one of the best to ever grace a professional wrestling ring. The man is a great character worker, such a great promo, and the best, I'm saying it, the best in-ring technician to ever step into a WWE ring. At number 11, we have Macho Man Randy Savage. ChatGPT says that Randy Savage is a 2-time WWE champion, a key figure in the late 80s and early 90s, and known for iconic matches and promos. When I think of Macho Man Randy Savage, I think of his character, and like ChatGPT said, his promos were something that still stand the test of time, but he also just has a ridiculously awesome arsenal of fantastic fantastic matches to boot, some that are still heralded today as one of the best matches in the history of the sport. For example, Macho versus Ricky the Dragon Steamboat at WrestleMania 3. And as a character, even though unfortunately he's already passed away, he has really stood the test of time. There are still people to this day doing shitty Macho Man Randy Savage impressions. So I would say that he is definitely one of the most influential figures and characters in the history of this sport. But before my time, and I'm biased, and I don't think that there aren't any humans that aren't biased, so he probably wouldn't be on my list of like my greats because I didn't get to experience Macho. Ask Sancho from the Wrestling is Cool podcast, my co-host, and I bet you that he would have Macho Man Randy Savage really high on his list. He loves Macho Man. Now we are in the top 10, and I feel like number 10, ChatGPT, I think you're going to create a little bit of controversy here. It has the Tribal Chief Roman Reigns at number 10, a name that I think a lot of fans of modern era WWE would probably have much higher. Roman Reigns is the head of the Bloodline faction, one of the best factions of all time, according to ChatGPT, multi-time world champion, and has dominated WWE in the 2020s. Well, I feel like you're actually cutting him short there, ChatGPT. He's been dominating the WWE since 2015. Sure, we didn't love him dominating WWE from 2015 to 2020, we'll say that, but the domination of Roman Reigns has been really long. And on top of that, when I look at how many WrestleMania main events he's been a part of, I believe now he holds the record. If not, he's tied for the record. The man is an accolade resume machine, a resume that would stretch all the way to the floor with everything that he's accomplished. I think that you have to start having Roman Reigns in the discussion, not only as one of the GOATs in WWE, but that stupid conversation that we all, for some reason, still love to have, which is who's in the WWE Mount Rushmore. I think Roman's in it now. At number 9, ChatGPT has the Viper, Randy Orton. ChatGPT says it has Randy Orton on here because he's a 14-time world champion and one of WWE's most consistent performers over the past 2 decades. Yep and yep. When we're talking accolades and things accomplished within the WWE, Randy Orton's near the damn tippity top. I think maybe the one thing that might keep him down on these like AI generated lists or some other pundits or wrestling websites might be maybe he just never had the same cultural impact as like a Stone Cold, a John Cena, Hulk Hogan, and now a Roman Reigns. But Randy is still Randy freaking Orton. Randy, for me, would be higher on this list. Also partly because he's one of my favorites of all time, but I'm glad that ChatGPT at the very least recognizes the greatness of the Viper and has him in the top 10. And number 8, ChatGPT has Bret the Hitman Hart. And you know what's funny? I never really got to experience Bret Hart in my fandom, but I've recently been watching a lot of Bret Hart matches. In fact, for the Wrestling is Cool Match Club, we just watched Bret Hart versus Stone Cold at WrestleMania 13 in a submission match. And that man might be the best, most fluid in-ring technician that I've ever seen. Like, that's why people ask me, like, what's your dream match that never happened? Kurt Angle, Bret Hart. Kurt Angle, Bret Hart would actually implode the universes and end existence as it is with how good of a match that would be. See, me personally, I never saw Bret Hart as my childhood hero because I never got to experience that. All of my experience of Bret Hart has come after the fact, but there's just no bad Bret Hart match that I've seen. The man really is just the excellence of execution. And number 7, ChatGPT has the Game, the cerebral assassin, Triple H. ChatGPT calls Triple H a 14-time world champion, a major figure in the Attitude Era, evolution, and WWE's transition into the modern era. Not only that, but if you want to start including Papa H's work as a booker and as an executive, maybe his stock goes up even a little bit. It's funny, I had this conversation with Sancho not too long ago that I think that once more time passes, let's say 30 years go by, I think that people are going to remember Triple H more as an executive of the WWE than as an actual performer, because his work as an executive, as a booker, as somebody that's creating storylines has fundamentally improved professional wrestling by leaps and bounds, by literally factors of 10. Meanwhile, as a performer, still one of the greatest of all time, but was never like the face of the company, was never like the guy. It's an interesting thought process to go through to see, you know, what he's going to be remembered for the most within the next 30 years. But Triple H is the GOAT. I think he's the greatest heel ever in the history of professional wrestling. Accolades out the ass. I don't blame people for having him high up on their list. He's high up on mine too. At number 6, ChatGPT has The Rock, saying he's a multi-time WWE champion, a key figure in the Attitude Era, and one of WWE's most successful crossover stars. But damn it, ChatGPT, we just said that we're only considering accolades within the WWE. It's great that The Rock went off and became a massive uber mega billionaire in Hollywood and other endeavors, but that doesn't matter here. And unfortunately, The Rock, as amazing as he is, one of my favorites of all time, one of the greatest promos of all time, great wrestler, incredible entertainer, some of the best matches and feuds, wasn't there for very long. And I do think that his influence during the Attitude Era is the reason why he's still propelled so high on these lists. But I mean, I think it might be a little bit too high. At number 5, ChatGPT has the Heartbreak Kid, Shawn Michaels. And I feel like this might be a little bit too low. Not by a lot, because we're only in the top 5, but Shawn Michaels, man. Dude, it's Shawn freaking Michaels. ChatGPT says, known as Mr. WrestleMania, 4-time world champion and one of the greatest in-ring performers in WWE history. But I have to add another thing that people do not talk about enough with Shawn Michaels is that the man had 2 Hall of Fame careers, one in the 90s and the 80s as part of the Rockers, and of course his run as a single star, helping start the Attitude Era. He has to retire, comes back in 2002, and then from 2002 to 2009 he has yet another Hall of Fame worthy career. This man is incredibly good. Shawn Michaels is always a part of some of my favorite matches of all time, some of my favorite wrestling moments of all time, some of my favorite promos, some of my favorite storylines. Like, Shawn Michaels to me is so, like, he's, when it comes to figures, he's like godlike in wrestling. At number 4, John Cena has my GOAT, John Cena. However, I totally understand that people wouldn't have John Cena as their number 1. I do, because I'm a John Cena guy. What can I say? Wrestling fans inherently were biased to the people that we got to grow up with. That's why you see so many people from the Attitude Era refusing to say that anything could be as good as the Attitude Era. It's just their nature. And because I'm a biased Cena fan that grew up with Cena from the very onset, I'm hanging on to John Cena being the GOAT. In terms of accolades, he sure as hell is, at the very minimum, 16-time world champion as of the making of this video, very likely going to be breaking that record as well. The face of the WWE over a decade, in significant both in-ring and pop culture influence. Again, we don't really care about what's happening outside of the WWE, so ChatGPT, you're cheating with these. But it's true, there's very few people in the history of the sport that can say they are the face of a generation. That's exactly what Cena was. At number 3, ChatGPT has Hulk Hogan. All right. Congrats. All right, whatever. I want to move on. I don't really love Hulk Hogan. I don't think many people do love Hulk Hogan either, but obviously his influence is insane. The things that he's accomplished, all the WrestleManias, everything that this man did in the early days of the WWF were really the blueprint as to how to be like the next guy, how to be the biggest superstar within the world of professional wrestling possible. But the reason I never love Hulk Hogan is because, to me, that he's pure character, right? I don't love Hulk Hogan matches. If there are great matches, it's because of the moment as opposed to what actually happens in the ring. And I really like a well-rounded performer. That being said, The Rock and Hulk Hogan, still one of my favorite matches of all time from WrestleMania 18. But obviously, when you're making these lists, like, Hulk Hogan is near the top. There's just no denying that. At number 2, all right, folks, it's really down to 2 people. People knew it was going to come down to 2 people. At number 2, ChatGPT went with Stone Cold Steve Austin. The man that, in my eyes, is responsible for taking the WWE out of some really like dark ages and those garbage 90s eras, inciting the Attitude Era and making wrestling cool. propelling wrestling right back into the mainstream, and to this day, he's still the biggest attraction that the WWE has ever had. We talked about Cena being the face of a generation. Stone Cold is the face of a generation, and not only is he the face of a generation, he's the face of what most people consider to be the best generation. Meanwhile, Cena is the face of the not so great generation. When you look at accolades, like, there's people that just have way more than Stone Cold, but in this situation, it just doesn't matter, because regardless of what Stone Cold was doing, he was the needle mover for the WWE every single Monday night. And coming in at number 1, ChatGPT has the Phenom, The Undertaker, as the greatest WWE superstar of all time. ChatGPT lists the fact that Undertaker is a multi-time WWE champion, iconic WrestleMania streak, and an enduring presence in WWE history. A presence that we still feel to this day. You all popped your absolute living asses off when you heard Taker's gong at WrestleMania 40. Taker as a character, as a gimmick, the greatest of all time. When it comes to his matches, he has some of the greatest of all time. When it comes to his influence, his longevity, I feel like he's the most just well-rounded concept of what an iconic WWE star is. Even if he wasn't the individual face of one particular era, you can make the argument that Taker is just the face of the WWE brand. I love Taker at number 1. I think it's a respectable choice. But folks, that's it from ChatGPT. Thank you so much for watching this video. AI is an interesting beast. But that's it, folks. I'm done. Get out of here.